There is indeed a method to my madness and a point to my ranting ramblings. And for this brief episode, I thought I'd drill down deep and recap the central point for those of you out there who haven't come across it yet or weren't paying attention over the course of the last 7 years. Join me for a quick episode of the Almost Daily Zencast. This is the Almost Daily Zencast. Hello and namaste. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I am your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Let's get started. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, and good night to you. Hello and namaste, and welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. If you appreciate what we've been doing here on this podcast since we launched, just days after the orange man rolled down the golden escalator, please join us on a journey backwards and forwards through time. Deep dive into the backlog of episodes and start collecting the imaginary pins on the corkboard to put together the big picture. And stay tuned for more episodes, as we will be dropping them more often, more frequently, more almost daily, as it were, than ever before. Friends, here it is. The central recap. The one fundamental point I've been trying to make for this entire time, that I beg for all of humanity to take 5 minutes to contemplate. Are you ready? All ideological constructs, whether they are political or religious, cultural or anti-cultural, whether they're leftist or rightist, centrist or extremist, all ideological constructs are made up and completely imaginary. So it makes zero sense for us to be dividing ourselves as a species into little groups that blindly and desperately cling to one little collection of ideological constructs and stand in opposition to others at the expense of our own well-being, each other's well-being, and future generational well-being. We are putting at risk the well-being of our progeny. Or if you prefer, if you feel I'm too foreign and too alien, your progeny. I like the inclusive royal we. Although I am laughed at, pointed at, mocked, and ridiculed by human beings from every ideological corner of the political compass. And they all have one thing in common. They would rather cling to the ideological construct of their choice, insert name of whatever club, tribe, party, gang, affiliate, consortium, whatever name you want. Every last one of them, from the most aboriginal and tribal and nativist of ideologies to the most postmodern, pre-dystopian, high technological, whatever, dissociative ideologies, all ideologies. I cannot put too fine a point on this, my dear friends, and I mean this with all due love and respect. My brothers and sisters in living personhood, your ideology, whichever one it is, whichever one you cling to, whichever one you've buried deep inside the cockles of your heart, and that is a real phrase. I didn't just make that up, and it's not as dirty as you might think, you little sewer rat. But whatever ideology, your Trumpism, your anti-Trumpism, your Democratic Party or bust, your political preference to be independent, your centrist, neo-centrist, post-centrist, whatever you want to call it, your cultural ideologies, your religious, dogmatic ideologies, doesn't matter which one, your supposedly self-liberated spiritual ideologies, if it comes to you in ideological construct form, with dogmatic ingredients, faith systems, and mechanics, and it requires your willing suspension of disbelief, and all ideology requires that at some level or another. Never mind the natural order of things. Even the natural order of things becomes an ideological construct. In other words, our imaginary narrative about what the real natural order of things is. Okay, what is the point? This sounds like an alarmist, meaningless thing to say. Yeah, of course, duh, Mr. Zeppo. All ideologies are made up. It's because we used our brains to make them up. And our imaginations to invent the details. And that's the catch-22 of the human experience. Imagination is simultaneously responsible for all things ever created, invented, made manifest by the human species, good or bad or indifferent. It is simultaneously this cherished, much beloved, imaginary to intangible imaginary thing, imagination, that we don't really understand, and that we praise people for having, and that we aspire to develop, and yet we chastise children for utilizing. And we leverage against one another politically until ideologies must, because of being stuck at loggerheads, turn into kinetic warfare. My current favorite social media meme is gods don't kill people, people with gods kill people. But we can extrapolate it a step further. Ideologies don't unalive people. People with ideologies unalive and oppress and torment and tyrannically try to exert power over other people. And what's the point of me saying all this? To make this wrap it up nice and tight and succinct, make this nice and short. I mean every ideology, economics, your beloved capitalism, made up, entirely imaginary, as the most annoying thing some prepubescent member of the species has ever spouted off that you've blown off. What a load of imaginary malarkey. All of it. It is all that ephemeral and unreal. The trees are real. Our ideas about the trees may be accurate, but they are imaginary. They may be inaccurate, they are still imaginary. Do you see where I'm going with this? All the problems that result from the tug of war of my ideology is more righteous than your ideology, all of those problems are very real, very tangible, very life and death, very much you won't notice them unless they're directly impacting you or someone you love kind of problems. Sexism and racism are nearly invisible to those who are not directly experiencing it, are not directly impacted by it, are not related to or witnessing it impacting any others. It's also invisible to those who are espousing it, perpetuating it unwittingly, bending over backwards to defend it and dismiss it and marginalize it and pretend it doesn't exist. And yet, the human individuals who are impacted by sexism and racism feel very real, very tangible things. Someone might even point out, but Mr. Zeppo, then that means racism is imaginary too. Yeah, the tenets of the mad, insane, counterintuitive, unnatural claim that my people are better than everybody else's people, therefore poo-poo on you. It's monkey poo-flinging level mentality, folks. And it's made up. And this offends some people on all sides of it. But I forget who this guy is, but somebody was asked on a man on the street interview reel, which is your favorite race? And the guy's like, I don't believe in race. They're a socially made up construct. Everyone's different shades of wheat. And he ain't wrong, bro. But I mean, that's a beautiful poetic way of stating. But here's a real hardcore, undeniable, factual statement that must be acknowledged. If you don't believe me, you can do the research, quote unquote, for yourself. Find out it ain't a lie. And by do the research, I mean go get a degree in genetics and test it for yourself, because that would be the real research. Googling something that is biased by using keywords in your favor of prove this idea wrong. Of course you're going to find stuff. That's not research. That's finding stuff. You're a good squirrel. Whoop-de-doo. Okay, imagine a squirrel, a head of cabbage, and a person of another quote-unquote race. You, dear friend, whoever you are, and I don't care where you came from, what you look like, you are genetically almost identical to all three of those. Those three other examples. Any human comparing their genetic makeup, and I know that it's subtle and it makes a huge difference because, oh wow, look at the crazy diversity of what we see out there in the real world. But also look at the repeating patterns. Why are there doppelgangers? It's not a secret conspiracy. The genome remixes and reuses and resamples the same ingredients over and over again. The human body is a clone vessel. What makes it authentic and original is the mind consciousness phenomena. We'll get to that pin on the corkboard. But at the body level, your mortal coil, that body that you think of as an accessory to your being, whatever that means, is genetically 99, and brace yourselves for this, 0.1 million nines. 99.1 million nines% genetically identical, not only to that person of the other race from you, not only to, any other person alive, all other human beings that ever have lived until we were genetically different. From when we arrived to this genetic code set, right? This particular programming revolution, as they might call it in the gaming industry, and that doesn't mean revolution like a fight. It means how many times have you revolved around issuing the code. I'm not sure how they use that word, why they use that word, but in quality assurance testing, you receive the next build, and it's called Rev number 7.2 or whatever, right? Revision, maybe not revolution. Anyways, you are genetically identical to one another. Every last mother-loving one of you. Do you understand this? And it gets crazier, dear friends. Because I forget the number for squirrels, but you have a common ancestor with squirrels. So it's like your cousins. And if you took a sample of your genome and you measured it statistically, it would be some ridiculous number over 50. I do remember the number for cabbage. You, dear listener, are 75% genetically identical to cabbage. Now, unless the science has evolved, changed, and updated the number, the last time I checked, that was considered scientifically verified. What does that mean? It means so many things, friends. But now I need you to pause right here, friends, and follow me in this crazy little voice. I don't know why that voice came out, but follow me here to the next step. Our bodies are the same. And as every meditator who taught anything ever throughout the history of time has tried to tell you at an individual and species-wide level, that which you call your individual consciousness is a unity field form function of reality itself. Now, that's even more mind-boggling than you're genetically related to cabbage. I know. But once you wrap your brain around these realities that can be observed empirically in nature through the observation of others and critically, something this species does very little of, the observation of inner self, you will ultimately, like I have and many others before me, come to the conclusion that those ancient teachers were onto something. That when Jesus said, I am that I am, and so are you, and everything I can do, you can do better, he wasn't predicting that song from that musical, which is what makes me giggle every time I say that or anyone references that phrase, that passage. I don't remember the exact wording. I don't remember the phrase and passage reference, but it's there. That which I can do, you also can do and will do better. That which I am, you will become. It's not just Jesus. Every major transcendentalist teacher, I get it. I just said all ideologies are made up. So the automatic playground retort is, well, your stupid transcendentalist ideology is made up too. I get it. Duh. Obviously. But the very heart of transcendentalist ideology is abandon all ideology. So you kind of lose it. You lose the thread there on the critique. You can criticize any other of the dogmatic commentary that, much like every other religious teaching, has evolved around the historical generational discussion of said teachings, right? What's something a lot of people forget when they argue about the Bible from a Christian perspective, that which is the Torah, which is a big first chunk of the Bible in Christian terms, most of it is commentary. We don't include that. It's a different book. But the Christians don't include that. It's a different book. But the same effect happened. Most of what postmodern American Christians think of as the God's only begotten word, to borrow and mutate a phrase, is actually years upon years of subtle variation, alteration, editing, changing, and straight up abusive manipulation. So I digress. A direct, sincere, what's the word I'm looking for? Disciplined, vigorous investigation into reality through the purposeful act of abdicating ideological constructs, and it is not easy, folks. It's a bit like trying to quit crack. You have been fed this addictive mumbo-jumbo since the day you were born, because language itself is the carrier of ideology. Language itself is one of the tools of imaginative, constructive manifestation. These tools are what gave us all the wonders of the world, from the pyramids to whatever new technological super thing you are really into. But it also gave us all the worst ideas that caused the most problems, the most suffering, the most pain, the most unaliving, the most endless wars. And we have to confront it, folks. Not only do we have to confront it, and here's the key. This is the bit everyone is either too distracted to address or too preconceived, pre-programmed to even contemplate. Once we realize, this is just the linchpin, realizing that everyone's ideology, no matter which one it is, and this will offend people on all sides, it's made up. It's as made up as any children's game. Right? I was going to say child's play, but that wasn't quite the right word. It's as made up as any children's game. And it does not need to remain the way it is. It does not need to perpetuate just because it has always been this way. We made it up. And we don't need to keep adding to it in the same dysfunctional way just because that's the way we've always done it, or because our forefathers said so, or blah, blah, blah. It's irrelevant. Because the idea, that whole heavy-laden burden idea of preserving the past, is a made-up, intangible, nonsensical idea. Now, mind you, there's obviously room for toxic outcomes here. If we, with wild abandon, which is a term of art, or a phrase, then if with wild abandon, with an N, proceed to then abandon, it's a different word, or, proceed to then have abandoned, past tense, everything, without preparation, without fortification of the mind and the heart and the soul, without, and here's the critical key, without healing. We will never, and maybe I'm wrong, friends. I've been called crazy since Ronald Reagan was in office. And I remember, I was called crazy. Why is a former cowboy movie star and cigarette salesman the president of this country? Oh, you crazy little boy. You don't know nothing about American politics. I don't know why he came out southern sounding accent like that, but there you go. Now, you know what was crazy? Reaganomics was crazy. Trickle-down economics was crazy. The made-up ideologies presented, perpetuated, and endorsed by Ronald Reagan. Cray. Every ideology that all human beings are currently arguing, fighting, and willing to unalive themselves or each other over are fundamentally insane. Because they implicitly and empirically depend on the suffering and pain of others for a few to succeed. The imbalance and the abuse and the toxicity is built in. Why? Not because of some imaginary scapegoat, literally, that's where we get the term, made up bad guy made them do it, or made you do it, or made me do it. That's the oldest known form of psyop, of psychological manipulation tactics, known to recorded history. Oh, the devil made me do it, therefore I can't, and I'm going to do it again because, or God asked me to do it. Same thing. Now, I'm not denying the existence of a divinity. Again, words matter, folks, despite having just ranted and railed about how they're all made up. How we use them matters. The made-up ideologies around the world are made up and therefore easily changed. Because how we use them matters. How is the Trumpopian movement using Christian ideology? Let me tell you, they ain't using it the way Yeshua Christos and Maria Magdalene taught, because they were a power couple, and she was an equal teacher and disciple. And then, chauvinists were like, well, we can't have that. Let's turn her into a whore. But that's a whole nother discussion. We've talked about it before. Pin on the corkboard. The key right there, folks, the thing everything distracts you from is simple. Why is there corruption in the world? Because there is unhealed psychological, emotional, spiritual, generational trauma. And you may not be aware of it. You may not feel it. You may be on top of the world. You may be sitting on your yacht in the Bahamas listening to this podcast going, what is this going on about? But I assure you, deep down, if you unraveled the onion skin layers and peered with your cosmic inner eye towards that intangible thing you call the center of your consciousness, you would find during that journey towards that center of your being that I am not making this up, and that there is a lot of work to be done, individually and collectively, because we can rebuild systems again and again and again and again. We can have civil wars over and over and over and over. We can colonize and liberate each other from tyrannical governments and debate which tyrannical government is the least tyrannical over and over for another 5,000 years, if you want. I don't know about you, but that sounds tedious AF to this guy. Mostly because I feel the pain of the millennia upon millennia we've already been doing this, bashing our faces against a brick wall while simultaneously beating a dead horse, to mix a few metaphors together. For the next 10,000 years, if we do not heal ourselves, help each other heal one another, in order to heal the human species, guess what? We're going to keep building broken systems. We're going to keep having this orthodox and liberal, this left versus right, this north versus south, this east versus west, all of the engineered wedge issue double-barreled echo chambers. Pin on the corkboard. I've been talking about that for 8 years. Where have you been? Catch up. There's a lot of episodes to catch up on if you're not. That's why I don't drop an episode every day, folks. It's the almost daily Zencast with enough backlog content for you to listen to 3 episodes a day and never run out of episodes between now and the end of the year. And we are counting down the days, friends, to the new election. Take a moment to contemplate what the point of what I just said is. Set aside whichever political party you belong to. Set aside whichever one you intend to vote for. Set aside which faith you think is the most important. Set aside whatever biases and dogmas were implanted in you as a child. And take a moment to think, what if... And now this is how a thought experiment works. I got a social media friend that keeps saying, thought experiment, and then just drops conclusions. Friend, that is not how thought experiments work. Here is a thought experiment, and it's all about the structure, because words and their definitions and how we use them matter. What if the thesis or hypothesis were true that we are all genetically identical? Therefore, all of the surface ideology about different racial values and priorities and biases is irrelevant and can be abdicated, and all of the pain and the trauma can be healed so that we can truly let it go. And if it is true that our consciousnesses can be verifiably proven to be one field of unity, in other words, that which I am is also that which you are. We just feel different because of the body and the lifetime of experience. And if we can take all of those hypotheses and individually, mutually, collectively, community-wide, species-wide, verify them, not blindly believe in them, not make up stories about them, not make demanding claims that are actually transactional about, regarding if you believe in this or you don't, therefore you are good or bad. No. Tangibly confirm them. I speak from a position of having experienced directly, physically, too much to back down from this quest. I throw the gauntlet at you, dear individual member of the human species. If you haven't gotten this message yet, join us now in this experiment. All those people that were waving the F around and find out banner made me laugh with like the cringy pity laugh, because all of those people, or at least the test sampling of those kinds of people I've encountered through public, direct, face-to-face discussion and social media online discussion, who claim that they question everything, that they use critical thinking, that they do their own research, and that they want to F around to find out, refuse to hear me out on my healing thesis. They laugh at the word healing. They don't apply critical thinking. What if his postulates are accurate, though? What if healing is the missing ingredient? What if politics perpetuates traumatic BS for that reason? What if that's why American politics feels like two big giant teams being ignored by a third wedge of the population playing a meaningless game of tug of war on a pair of treadmills that are wedge-shaped and engineered to keep you running inside of a double-barreled echo chamber where you can only hear your echo chamber and the people you're playing the tug of war against can only hear their echo chamber. What if all of that is so, not because the Democrats worship Satan or the Republicans have Jesus on their side, like the cartoon character versions of, which is the way they talk about it, without any proof, ever. I have been called a worshiper of Satan. Never once in my life. Never once in my life. But because I dare criticize the GOP, who openly claim to be following the teachings of Yeshua and yet behave exactly like the Pharisees who Yeshua was busy debunking and politically criticizing. Now, what if instead of staying on the treadmill, we engaged our critical thinking and asked the questions that get us to step off the treadmill? And what if, instead of continuing to play the tug of war, we set down the rope for one hot minute? And what if, recognizing that we are indeed willingly or unwittingly caught up in an echo chamber of our own tribal coalition of we believe in these same ideological constructs, which we won't admit are made up and have no actual proof of power in nature themselves, and we stepped out of those echo chambers? What if we did that and we discovered, oh, here is the unresolved trauma in my body. Here is the unresolved trauma in my spirit. Here is the unresolved trauma in my energy. And I feel it for the first time ever because I'm not busy yelling at that other political party. I'm not busy standing my ground defending imaginary, made-up nonsense. And if we all took the time and effort to recognize how real that trauma is inside of ourselves and inside of each other, maybe, just maybe then, if enough percentage of the human species are willing to go through that process and actually apply critical thinking to that process and actually do the physical research of doing the quest for self-discovery and self-liberation from the cage that is the mental construct of I must live that way, so that we can then heal. And yeah, I know that sounds vague and magical and miraculous, and it really boggles the mind. Self-proclaimed Trumpopian Christians will laugh at everything I just said and then praise Jesus that he protected Donald Trump from a gunshot attempt, right? Like from an attempted assassination, which may or may not have been. It's extra funny to see right-wingers come up with conspiracy theories about Donald Trump. And, it's extra hilarious. It doesn't matter which side is coming up with them. The conspiracy theory loving Trumpopian movement, the self-proclaimed, they called themselves this, I'm not using it as a pejorative, the self-proclaimed F your feelings crowd sure has a lot of fragile, brittle, easily broken up, snowflakey feelings when anyone even vaguely whispers of a concept, of a plan, of an idea of a potential conspiracy theory that focuses around him being a fraud. And you don't need a conspiracy theory. Some of us have been literally telling you since day one, this dude is not to be trusted. This dude is a deeply fraudulent individual. We have witnessed it over the decades. Here's our reasons. Okay. I, too, am on this journey. I'm not pretending. Never have I ever, and I've been falsely accused of this both by non-spiritual people and spiritual people. Never have I ever, despite the number of accusations, never have I ever claimed to have achieved enlightenment. Never have I claimed to have achieved transcendence. What I have said, and will continue to say over and over again, is given my experiences, tangible, physical, phenomenological experiences, which I believe can be repeated and verified by others, I will stand on this hill and not die, but try to bring everyone's attention to the necessary healing. Because if we don't address that required healing, it is required. You can't build a bike. Let's say you bought a bike from IKEA. It's funny that IKEA does not sell bicycles because build your own bicycle kits are pretty popular from over there, from what I understand. But I digress. Imagine you bought a piece of furniture, a bicycle, whatever, and it was assembly required. I totally forgot what kind of analogy I was trying to make. It's never going to build itself, right? The instructions, however specific, are not the bicycle itself. You can't ride the instructions. You have to build the bike tangibly. If your tools are broken, if the assembly parts are mismanufactured, malformed, ill-fitting, through no fault of your own, but from the manufacturer, you're never going to successfully build that bike. That's a terrible analogy, but you get my point. Everybody, here's the third point of we all have this in common. We are all genetically identical. We are all the same field of consciousness that is co-creatively, co-emergently experiencing itself simultaneously as the lens of perception, the object perceived, and the perceiver doing the perception. We all have that in common. That is inescapable. No matter how much you deny it, and you say that it can't be true, and that and everything else is what it, and you thump at the Bible, or you thump at the Quran, or you thump at the Torah, it doesn't matter. And the irony is, all your sacred books, all of your ancient prophets, at some point or other, they said something to this effect, and either the words were changed so much so that it doesn't make any sense anymore, or it was just straight up erased from history, or denied, or called apocryphal, depending on context and historical and which cultural blah blah blah. The final point of connectivity we all have is we all want the same things. We all want to thrive, whatever that means. We all want to be happy, whatever that means. We all want to be successful, whatever that means. Now, the problems come about when we strive for these things, these good sounding things, these things we all want in common, these things we all feel uniformly, universally, we individually deserve. The problems come about when we try to achieve these things with blunted, messed up, malformed, mismanufactured tools and parts. When we go about trying to do a good thing, but we have not healed our ego, that good thing gets expressed in the worst way possible. And this will repeatedly happen individually, in relationships, relationally, community-wise, collectively, in tribes and meta-tribes, and at the state and national level, at the organizational level, at the governmental level, at the organized religious level, when we start talking about institutional beings, which are giant collections of us being idiots, not knowing what we're doing. And we will not, at least I am firmly convinced, I could be wrong, but I highly doubt that we will ever build a pure, altruistic, well-balanced, healthy, functional system that lifts everyone up equally and balances out all things so that people are held to account but also not oppressed. We will never build that glorious utopian system or multi-patchwork of systems, which I doubt one uniform system will ever satisfy all, even if we were in a well-heeled state. But never mind getting even remotely close. If we persist in either unwittingly neglecting or willfully ignoring the root cause of all of our problems. It isn't money. The root cause of all of our problems is not some imaginary scapegoat villainous character with horns. The root cause of all of our problems is not that politician or that group of minorities. The root cause of all of our problems that we keep creating, building, re-engineering, and abusing each other with is the neglected and unhealed spiritual trauma that is buried deep in the cockles of your heart. I'm not accusing you. You're not the villain. You are your own God, playing villain and victim. Because you are me, and I am you, and we have always been each other, which means you and I are the same root source of perceiver consciousness in Donald Trump, but his messed up ego, which is where the trauma resides and creates its own consciousness node and develops its own awareness of how to keep itself protected, therefore sustainably traumatized, therefore perpetually unhealed, and therefore doing crazier, horrible things that inflict more trauma on others and self. Once we can wrap our brains around all of those equations and do the work, then, according to my crazy healing hypothesis, to call it something other than a conspiracy theory, then we will achieve an individual, a relational, relativistic, a community, and tribal, collectivistic, species-wide healing. And through that healing, we will be able to awaken higher orders of empathic consciousness, and therefore have the awareness, have the empathy, have the organic, natural, authentic kindness and sympathy to be able to build systems that are equitable and compassionate and truly fair for all. Call me crazy. I could be wrong. And there's really only one way to find out. And this podcast has always been at its core, at its center, about that. And I'm pinned on the corkboard. I've had to say it before, and I'm sure we're going to come full circle and have to say it again, because people keep missing this point. I humbly thank you for tuning in and checking this out. I hope you take some time to sit with this and meditate and look deep within for yourself. Don't take my word for it. If you are already leaning in this direction and you find that you agree, That's great, but the gauntlet is still being smashed across your face and thrown at your feet. Even if you agree and you think you've done this work, this is an invitation to double down, not just to do the work more enthusiastically, more emphatically, with more critical thinking, with more experimental testing, but to also share about it. Share this episode. Share your experiences. Share your voice and mine so that more people might be drawn to this idea and turn inwards. Because as what's his name, insert name of philosopher here, pointed out, people who look outwards slumber. Those who look within awaken. I'm not claiming to be awake because I'm convinced, based on my research and my testing, that reality is the dream. You can't be awake in the dream, can you? When you wake up from your dream, you're no longer there, you're here, right? If you woke up from this dream, you wouldn't be here anymore. You'd be wherever there is, being awake. If you achieved enlightenment, you wouldn't be in your physical body avatar. You'd be in your disincorporated, magical, spiritual, Merkaba, chariot of light, fractal consciousness, holographic avatar. There's many ways to reference that avatar, but like you would be your own higher self. Here's proof of it, right? The golden rule, to close off on this point. This is a linchpin statement. Do the research for yourself. Expressions of the golden rule have existed and can be found in every religion, in every culture around the world. And when you look at some of the oldest versions of that, and you look at the most original language of it in expressing that, it doesn't say, treat others the way you would like to be treated. That's very ego-seductive. It's altruistic sounding, but it ultimately sort of seduces the ego. How do you want to be treated? How do you want to be treated? You want to be treated special, don't you? It's an ego trap. The original expression, to the best of my understanding, and I could be wrong, and I'll always be welcoming of new information to be corrected, but I will not abide by meaningless, blind argumentation where all you do is spew denials and playground bully insults and gaslighting and trolling. That always gets called out. It's part of we must be mirrors to one another in order to engage in the light work and the shadow work. Pins on the corkboard, we've discussed it before. We'll talk about that again soon. What was the thing right before that I was trying to wrap up on? Yes, the golden rule. Treat others as you would like to be treated. That's such a watered down and misleading way of saying it. The original expression, if we were to translate it into English directly from its authentic original wording in, I believe, Aramaic, and if not Aramaic, then Greek, one of the two, was, if I'm not mistaken, and if the people I encountered expressing this did their research correctly, I'm not claiming that I discovered this through my own personal research, but through years of reading and digging into other people who literally were doing actual tangible research. And if you don't know the difference, get a dictionary, because Googling things is not research. Research involves fieldwork. Research involves going to the places and finding the items, and and to the best of your ability, finding the sources and the direct evidences and the witnesses, etc. But I digress. According to the people that I learned this from in a book, which I believe was Mars Lull, a strange name from Scandinavian language that is hard to pronounce and hard to spell, but Mars Lull, I believe, in The Law of Light. He points out and shows his sources, so he's not just making the claim the way I am. He's got sources. Where is that book? Yeah, The Law of Light by Lars Mull. The original expression of the saying, of the golden rule, treat others as you would like to be treated, is actually treat all others as though they are your own soul or higher spirit. and we'll end the show on that. Take a day or a week or a month to meditate on that. And then come back to me and let's keep discussing. Thank you for tuning in. This has been a special episode of the Almost Daily Zencast. Please tune in for more. Come on down to solo.to/Mr. Zeppo.
And that is what I've got to say about that. As always, thank you kindly for listening. This has been the Almost Daily Zencast with your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Until next time, may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart.
Look within, heal yourself, help others heal themselves, help the world heal, help humanity heal each other, help the species heal so that we can build healthy systems. Namaste and thank you.